Alright, hey guys, back again with another video. Today I want to talk about meta and a bunch of different variations of it and what is it. So just hop right into it. So what is it? I found a good acronym for it. It's most effective tactic available, and I really enjoy that like definition so you can kind of break it down a little bit more. So the meta is kind of just what's strong at the time, and it can kind of change over time. So it's basically like what you would want to pick and say like this is the highest win rate, and we pick it blindly, and then there's a good chance that the other team also has that picked as well. So you're going to most likely be running into comps and expect to win regardless of your skill, just because of how good the comp is and how it's been figured out and developed over time. So meta is basically what's strong at that time. Sometimes it's due to patches, sometimes it's due to what other heroes are played. So at the moment, it would probably be like Sombra Doomfist, Lucio Anna, Winston Diva. That's probably what the most meta composition is, probably. There's some goats there as well, but this is probably like what's good because it does well against goats, it does well against itself. So you could say that that's a very meta composition. How it changes, it's really the biggest thing is patches. So what's been the most prevalent thing in Overwatch that's made it and forced it to change is support changes. So regardless of DPS changes, it's usually pretty minor, but whenever a support changes, then it usually shifts the meta a lot. So like, especially when there was much less supports being played before, so it was only like 3 supports or 4 supports, then it was pretty massive changes. So Anna gets nerfed a little bit, dive meta becomes a more meta thing, the 3 tank kind of dies out, and then Zen becomes more meta, then Anna. Anna is kind of like not used at all anymore. It's just Lucio Zen all the time. Then it's Mercy starts to come into meta, Mercy Zen. So it's just like these things that change, and then everything else remained pretty static. It's probably because Winston and Diva were ridiculously strong forever now, and then the dive DPS just changed around that, basically which supports were good. So it changes basically due to patches. Sometimes it's whatever feels like the strongest at the time. So people will just play around with things and they will say, hey, this hero doesn't even get changed, but its old counter got changed, so now it's stronger. So if Soldier got nerfed, McCree got nerfed, Pharah instantly becomes stronger. Genji is a little bit stronger. So sometimes it doesn't even need to be directly to that hero. It can just be things played around it, which will inevitably force everything around it to change. And so that can really just affect the meta and like really change things in a just an interesting way, I'd guess. The next is regional differences. Regional differences is kind of like a weird thing where I'd say for not many games, so for Overwatch League at the highest level, there's no regional differences. Everyone plays in the same place, so even if you are Korean, Canadian, from Sweden, it doesn't even matter where you're from. You all play in the same place, so you all practice on the same ladder, you scrim against each other. So there isn't any regional differences really. Maybe there's some like things they learned from before, but like teams start to like mimic each other and really start to become what their region is. So as an extension, NA Contenders became that where it plays different than a lot of other regions where I'd say Europe prioritized tanks regardless of what meta it was in, where NA last season was playing a ton of Tracer Sombra, where EU is still playing more tanks. And then coming into this next season, it's again, EU is spamming tanks and Korea is spamming tanks. China and NA are not spamming tanks as much. They're playing a lot more 2-2-2. So there can be like really significant regional differences, and I think part of that is due to the teams all scrim each other, so it becomes like baseline. So if one team is very dominant with one comp, maybe the other teams will start to mimic that, and maybe it won't even appear to be meta for like that specific reason, but the other teams in the region will have played against that better team and the number one team, and they'll say, hey, the number one team's playing goats all the time. In the case of EU, maybe we should play goats more often as the 6th or 7th place team. And then all those teams start to mimic each other, and then the practice starts to become that of, hey, we're all playing goats all the time. This is now our regional thing, where NA might be different, where Fusion played way more dive than any other team in the rest of the world during goats meta and stuff. So they weren't as good as goats. They dominated teams not playing goats and spamming 2-2-2, so other teams might play them and look up to them and think, hey, maybe we need to play 2-2-2 and it'll be good for us. So it's just like change of regional differences. Some it affects ladder as well, where if the meta is weird for one region and you come to another, maybe you'll start to adapt to that. Where if you have Chinese players who are more used to playing Genji Widow on like the older patch, and then they come here and they're like, wow, we have to play more Hanzo. I guess we'll just practice that now. So you can like kind of shift things around depending on which players are where. And then developments of the same meta are things like the best example I can think of this is last season for like Overwatch League playoffs and then like contenders. It was basically like snipers are being played all the time. How do we counter snipers? We play Orisa and we spam shields on the ground. If the other team is running Mercy Zen and we are running 3 tanks, so we're running Hog, Diva, and Orisa, then we can spam their shield harder. We can have more uptime on our shield and give our snipers more opportunity to shoot them. And because Mercy had that 60 healing per second with her beam, it wasn't necessary that you needed to have Zen for the damage, because his damage was actually obsolete to Roadhog. He didn't offer that same combo potential with the hook and the suck that Orisa and Hog could pull off together. He could self-heal. It made like it actually harder to dive them. So if you were going to run dive, yes, the Mercy is now much more vulnerable because she won't get any healing, but there's another tanky body and another shotgun basically on that team that can deny any tanks that are trying to dive in. So it became and it developed where it was like the same meta for a while and nothing really changed. People just found out, wait, if we're playing the certain comp, there's actually an advantage to playing Roadhog over Zen, and there was no changes needed for that. So it kind of just became this thing where it's like, man, maybe we play to counter this new meta comp where people are playing 3 tank all the time, and people develop the strategy of have your flex support play Tracer, and then have your Tracer be a flank and look to just kill the Mercy or kill a sniper that's isolated, and then maybe you just play Orisa Diva and then just look to eat all the combos and then just have like a really like decisive flanking core that will commit onto the snipers, commit onto the Mercy. And so there was all these things that just evolved from the meta where it was like people are picking this very specific comp. We are going to pick the exact hard counter to that, and that also somewhat becomes meta because the very reliable comp is always going to be played on defense. So it was like very telegraphed, and you'd be like, okay, on offense we can now swap to this comp and know we're going to counter them, or you can scout it very early on. So there's the advantage of offense being able to, all right, let's just do this comp. Let's walk out. Oh, they're playing the comp that we want them to play. Okay, we can go back and swap to the comp that will exactly counter that, and that then becomes the meta of like swapping. And that's like been the biggest change I'd say in Overwatch, where it wasn't just let's just pick Genji Tracer, Monkey Diva, Mercy Zen, whatever supports, and we'll just win this game. Where that actually became an obsolete comp, where teams could stop just picking that. Like before it was like, oh, we're messing up, just pick this comp, we'll win the game. We're winning the game, let's just stay on this comp. And so there was no need to really ever change, maybe just one hero here and there, but besides that, it was basically you could just play that comp, win every game. So now it's a lot more about changing, and that actually became the meta of like, how can your team adapt? Can you play a good stable comp and then decide and pick the counter comp? That's also flexible, but pick something that will work with your team and then will work to stop the enemy team whenever they swap to counter you. And so then it became a meta of just swapping heroes and things like that. So the meta can change. It can really be a lot of different things. It's really just what's most effective at that time, and it can really adapt and change into different things depending even on the region. So